The battlefield was silent. Smoke rose from broken ships scattered across the ground. Fire burned in the distance, and the sky glowed red from falling debris. A lone human soldier named Mark stood among the wreckage. His armor was scratched, his rifle half damaged, but his spirit was unbroken. He had been part of a human fleet that came to stop a galactic invasion. The enemy was powerful, their weapons advanced, and their armies endless. The battle had ended badly, and Mark's unit was gone. He was the only one who survived on this strange world. Mark took a deep breath and scanned the land. He had learned one lesson in every fight: survival was not about luck, it was about will. With no command and no allies, he started to walk across the ruined plain, searching for water, shelter, and a way out. As he walked, he noticed something unusual. In the middle of a broken city stood a tower, still glowing faint blue even after destruction. Most buildings had collapsed, but this one held strong. He felt drawn to it, as if something inside was calling. He tightened his grip on the rifle and entered. The tower was quiet inside, its walls covered with strange alien writing. The air smelled old, filled with dust and the faint hum of energy. Mark moved carefully, checking every corner, his training guiding each step. He reached the lower chamber, and that was when he heard its soft breathing, not mechanical, not the sound of machines, but the sound of life. He raised his rifle and aimed at the source. A tall figure stepped from the shadows. She was not human. Her skin shimmered faint silver, her eyes glowing like crystals. She wore a torn royal cloak, though dirt and blood stained it. Chains of energy were locked around her wrists. Mark lowered his weapon slightly. He realized she was a prisoner, not an enemy. The alien looked at him with wide eyes. "A human," she whispered, her voice weak but filled with surprise. Mark kept his tone calm. "Who are you?" She lifted her head with dignity despite her wounds. "I am Princess Alira, daughter of the High Throne of the Viuri Empire. My world has fallen, my guards are gone, and I am left to die here." Before Mark could answer, a metallic sound echoed in the chamber. From the walls, machines began to rise. They were tall drones with red eyes, each armed with blades and energy weapons. Their programming was clear: protect the prison, kill any intruder. Alira closed her eyes, certain death was near. Her guards, trained from birth, had failed against these machines. How could one human soldier survive what dozens could not? But Mark did not step back. He pulled his rifle tight against his shoulder. With quick aim, he fired at the first drone, blasting its core before it could attack. Then he rolled across the floor, firing at another, knocking it to the ground. The chamber lit up with energy bolts. Mark ducked behind a stone pillar, his armor sparking as shots hit near him. He knew he could not waste bullets. Every shot had to count. He timed the movements of the drones, firing at their weak spots. Sparks flew, metal shattered, and one by one they fell. The last machine rushed him with blades drawn. Mark dropped his rifle, grabbed a broken chain from the floor, and swung it with force. The chain wrapped around the machine's neck, and with a hard pull, he ripped the head clean off. Silence returned to the chamber. Smoke rose from the broken machines. Mark picked up his rifle again and checked the corners. No more enemies. Princess Alira stared at him, her lips parted in disbelief. She had seen many warriors fall to these machines, but this human had destroyed them alone with skill and courage. Mark walked to her side and studied the energy chains. They were advanced, but he noticed the power source linked to a glowing panel on the wall. With a single shot, he destroyed the control node. The chains vanished, leaving Alira free. She rubbed her wrists and looked at him. "You are different from the others," she said softly. "But I must ask you one question. Can you protect me, human?" Mark met her eyes. He did not speak many words. He simply gave a firm nod. His face showed calm strength, no fear, no doubt. Alira was silent. She thought of her fallen empire, her broken guards, and her hopeless escape. She looked at this human soldier, small compared to the towering enemies she had known, yet he stood taller in spirit than anyone she had seen. Still, she could not believe yet. In her heart, she thought, how can one man protect me when armies have failed? Mark offered his hand. "If you want to live, stay close to me." She hesitated, then placed her silver hand in his. For the first time since her capture, she felt a spark of hope. Together, they stepped out of the chamber into the ruined city. The fires of war still burned around them, but something new had begun. The meeting of a fallen princess and a lone human soldier was not chance. It was the start of a journey that would change both their worlds forever. The ruined city stretched far and wide. Crumbled towers rose like broken teeth, and empty streets echoed with the sound of wind. Mark led the way, his rifle ready, scanning every shadow for movement. Princess Alira walked behind him, her cloak dragging across the dust. She moved with grace, but her eyes carried sorrow. She studied the human closely. His armor was not shining or decorated like the armor of her royal guard. It was scratched, patched, and dirty. His weapon was not elegant but heavy and simple. Yet the way he carried himself made her wonder. There was no fear in his steps, no hesitation in his eyes. Alira thought about her people. Her guards had been trained from birth to fight with honor. They wore bright armor, carried blades of energy, and swore oaths of loyalty. Still, they had fallen when the machines attacked. She remembered the screams, the collapse of her palace, and the endless fire. Now, this lone human walked ahead of her as if he could carry the weight of an empire on his shoulders. She frowned and whispered to herself, "How can he protect me when so many have failed?" Mark heard her voice but did not turn around. His focus stayed on the road ahead. He stopped near a fallen statue and raised a hand for silence. Alira froze. She watched him kneel down and touch the ground. His fingers brushed over tracks in the dust. They were fresh, the marks of boots and clawed feet. Enemies had passed recently. "We move quickly," he said. Alira wanted to question him, but his voice was firm, and she obeyed. They slipped through narrow alleys and climbed over broken walls. Mark chose paths that kept them hidden. Several times, Alira saw patrol drones flying above the ruins, red lights scanning for survivors. Each time, Mark pulled her into cover just before the lights passed. After hours of moving, they reached a safe corner, the remains of a collapsed library. The roof was half open, but the walls still gave shelter. Mark set his rifle down and checked the magazine. He counted his bullets carefully, his lips pressed into a hard line. Alira sat on a broken chair, her silver eyes glowing faintly in the dark. She watched him, her doubt still alive. "Human," she said softly, "you fight with skill, I admit. But your weapon holds only so many shots. Your armor is thin compared to the enemy. And you are just one. How do you believe you can protect me when whole legions have failed?" Mark did not answer at once. He cleaned the dust from his weapon and then looked at her. His face was calm, but his words carried weight. Your guards fought with pride. They stood in the open, showing strength but also making themselves easy targets. I fight with patience. I do not stand where the enemy expects. I strike when the time is right. That is how humans survive. Alira tilted her head, studying him. His explanation was simple, but she could not understand the depth behind it. In her world, strength was measured by how brightly one shone, how boldly one fought. This man spoke of shadows and patience. To her, it sounded less like honor and more like desperation. She wanted to argue, but before she could, Mark tossed her a small pack. Inside were dried food and a flask of water. Eat, he said. You need strength if you are to keep walking. Alira looked at the food with hesitation. It was rough, nothing like the royal meals she once had, but hunger spoke louder than pride. She ate slowly, watching him as he set up a small perimeter using broken machine parts. He placed them like alarms, so if anyone came close, the sound would wake him. The night grew colder. Alira pulled her cloak tighter, shivering. Mark noticed and took off a small blanket from his pack, handing it to her without a word. She accepted it, surprised by the gesture. Hours passed in silence. Mark leaned against a wall, rifle across his lap, eyes always scanning. Alira lay on the ground, her thoughts restless. She remembered her question to him in the chamber, "Can you protect me, human?" She still doubted his answer. He was strong, yes, but strength alone could not fight an empire. In her dreams, she saw flames again, her people falling, her throne collapsing. She woke with a start, breathing hard. Mark was still awake, sitting as still as a stone. She whispered, "Do you never rest?" He glanced at her. "Rest comes later. Now we survive." His words struck her. She realized he lived by simple rules. No speeches, no promises, only action. It was strange to her, almost alien. The next day, they moved again. The sun rose over the ruins, painting the city in pale gold. Alira followed him through broken bridges and tunnels. At times, he climbed walls with ease, pulling her up when she slipped. At other times, he stopped and listened, guiding her around danger before she even noticed it. At midday, they reached an old marketplace. Empty stalls stood like skeletons, and shattered glass crunched under their feet. Alira felt uneasy. The silence was too deep. She turned to speak, but Mark raised his hand for silence again. From the shadows, figures appeared. Not machines, but alien raiders, scavengers who searched the ruins for survivors to capture or sell. They were large, armored, their weapons crude but deadly. They saw the princess's cloak and grinned with greed. Alira's heart pounded. She looked at Mark, waiting for fear to appear in his face. But he simply adjusted his rifle, his eyes steady. The raiders shouted and charged. Alira felt her breath freeze. She thought, this is the end. No human can stand against them. But Mark did not step back. He moved forward. The marketplace was filled with broken stalls, fallen stone arches, and dust drifting in the air. Mark stood in the center with his rifle ready. Across from him, a band of raiders closed in, their armor patched with stolen metal and their weapons glowing with stolen power cells. Their eyes burned with hunger for violence and greed for what they saw. One of them pointed at Alira. "The princess lives. She will fetch a fortune. Take her." Alira's heart sank. She had faced enemies before, but always with her guards beside her. Now she stood with only this human soldier between her and capture. She remembered her question to him, "Can you protect me, human?" and fear filled her again. The raiders charged. Their heavy steps shook the ground. Mark did not move until the last moment. He dropped to one knee, raised his rifle, and fired 3 quick shots. The first raider fell, the second stumbled with a hole in his chest, and the third screamed as his weapon exploded from a direct hit. The others spread out, surprised by the speed and accuracy of his shots. Alira gasped. She had never seen such precision. Humans were smaller than these raiders, yet Mark fought as if size meant nothing. The raiders regrouped and tried to surround him. One rushed from the side with a blade. Mark swung his rifle like a club, smashing the weapon aside, then kicked the raider's legs from under him. Another came from behind. Mark spun, pulled a small knife from his belt, and drove it into the raider's shoulder before pulling his rifle up again. The princess watched in silence. Her mind told her this was impossible, but her eyes told her it was real. Mark kept moving, never standing still. He fired short bursts, ducked behind stalls, and used the broken walls for cover. The raiders were bigger, stronger, but slower and less skilled. They fought with rage, while Mark fought with control. A huge raider leader stepped forward, his chest covered with thick plates, his weapon a heavy hammer charged with energy. He laughed when he saw Mark. "One human cannot stand against me." Mark said nothing. His silence was more powerful than words. The raider leader swung the hammer, breaking a stone pillar into dust. Mark rolled aside, his rifle flashing as he fired at weak spots between the armor plates. Sparks flew, but the raider kept coming. With another swing, the hammer missed by inches, the ground shaking from the impact. Alira cried out, "Look out!" Mark did not panic. He dropped his rifle, grabbed a broken chain from the ground, and wrapped it around the hammer's handle as it swung down again. With all his strength, he pulled, twisting the weapon from the raider's grip. The hammer flew to the side, crashing into rubble. Before the raider could recover, Mark lifted his rifle again and fired at the exposed gap in the armor. The giant fell to his knees and collapsed with a crash. The other raiders hesitated. They looked at their fallen leader and then at the human who stood tall over him. Fear began to creep into their eyes. Mark aimed his rifle at them, his voice calm and hard. "Leave. Now." For a moment, the raiders considered fighting, but then they turned and fled into the ruins, dragging their wounded with them. The marketplace fell silent again. Alira stood frozen. She looked at the fallen bodies, the broken stalls, and the human soldier who now calmly reloaded his rifle as if nothing had happened. Her voice shook as she whispered, "How did you do that? You are only one." They were many. Mark glanced at her, his face expressionless. "You fight smart, not strong. Strength alone does not win battles." Alira tried to understand. Her people had always fought with numbers and honor. They faced enemies head-on, never hiding, never using the land around them. To see one man use shadows, cover, and timing to defeat an entire group was strange to her. It was as if he was rewriting the rules of war she had always believed. They moved from the marketplace before more raiders returned. Mark guided her through back alleys and down into a collapsed tunnel. The air was heavy, but it gave them shelter. As they rested, Alira could not stop staring at him. Her doubt was still there, but it was weaker now. She remembered the fear on the faces of the raiders when they saw him. That fear had once been hers, but now she felt something else. You could have left me when they came, she said. You could have saved yourself. Mark shook his head. I gave you my word. I will protect you. Alira lowered her eyes. She thought of her guards, sworn by oath yet defeated. She thought of her people, hiding or captured. She thought of this single human who had no reason to help her but chose to anyway. Still, she whispered, I do not understand you, human. You are strong, but your strength is not like the strength of my people. It comes from somewhere I cannot see. Mark did not answer. He sat in silence, sharpening his knife, his eyes steady. As night fell, Alira lay awake, her mind full of questions. She had asked him once if he could protect her. After this battle, she was beginning to believe. Yet she also feared. If he could do such things alone, what else was he capable of? The princess drifted into uneasy sleep, her thoughts circling around the human soldier. The one who had stood against raiders and won. The one who made her question everything she thought she knew about strength. Far above them, in the ruined sky, signals spread. The enemy now knew the princess lived. And word traveled fast that a human soldier was with her, defeating enemies no one else could. New dangers were already moving their way. The ruins were no longer quiet. Word had spread across the wastelands. Raiders whispered about a human soldier who had defeated their leader. Scavengers spoke of the alien princess who still lived. The story traveled quickly, and it reached ears that were far more dangerous. From the skies came hunters, armored troops sent by the enemy empire. Their ships were black, their engines silent, and their orders clear. Capture the princess. Kill anyone with her. Mark and Alira did not know how many enemies were coming, but they felt the danger growing with every step. They moved through broken tunnels that stretched beneath the city. The air smelled of rust and damp stone. Mark walked ahead with his rifle ready, his eyes scanning the shadows. Alira followed closely, her cloak brushing the walls. She tried to walk quietly, but every drop of water and every echo made her heart beat faster. At one point, Mark raised his hand, stopping her. He crouched and touched the ground. A faint vibration ran through the stone. He looked up at her. They are moving above us. Soldiers, not raiders. Alira's chest tightened. How many? Too many, Mark said simply. We cannot fight them all. We run. For hours, they moved deeper through the tunnels. Sometimes they heard the sound of boots above, sometimes the distant hum of a ship passing overhead. The hunters were searching carefully, not rushing. Mark knew these were no common raiders. These were trained soldiers, disciplined and relentless. They finally reached a crack of light at the far end of the tunnel. It opened into the wild desert outside the city. Sand stretched as far as the eye could see, glowing gold under the sun. Broken stone pillars rose here and there, the remains of an ancient age. Mark checked the horizon before stepping out. They will follow us into the desert. But out here, we choose where the fight happens. Alira shaded her eyes and looked at the endless sands. There is no water. No shelter. How will we survive here? Mark tightened the straps of his armor. We survive because we must. They walked for hours under the burning sun. The sand was soft and heavy, slowing their steps. Alira grew tired quickly, her royal life never having prepared her for such harsh travel. But Mark kept a steady pace, always alert, always scanning the horizon. At last, he spotted movement in the distance. Small ships were gliding low, scanning the desert floor. Hunters had already spread their net. "They know we are here," Alira said, her voice trembling. Mark led her to a cluster of broken stone spires. The jagged rocks gave some cover. He guided her into a narrow gap between them. "Stay low. Do not move until I tell you." She wanted to argue, but the look in his eyes silenced her. She crouched down, pressing against the rock, while Mark climbed higher to get a better view. 2 hunter patrols were closing in. Each group had 5 soldiers in black armor, their weapons sharp and glowing with energy. They moved in perfect formation, scanning every direction. Alira's hands trembled. She whispered to herself, "This is hopeless. No one can fight them all." Mark heard her words when he came down. He crouched beside her. "Listen carefully. They are trained, but they are predictable. They believe their numbers make them safe. That will be their weakness." She stared at him. "You speak as if you can fight an army with only shadows." Mark looked back at her, his face calm. "Shadows and timing win wars." Before she could reply, the hunters drew closer. Mark prepared a trap using pieces of broken metal he had carried. He planted them in the sand, arranging them in a pattern. Then he took out small charges from his pack and set them under the stones. Alira watched, confused. "What are you doing?" "Making the ground our weapon," he said. When the hunters stepped into the trap, Mark triggered the charges. A thunderous blast shook the sand, throwing 2 soldiers into the air and breaking their formation. Before the others could recover, Mark opened fire, his shots precise and deadly. One fell, then another. The survivors returned fire, their energy bolts striking the rocks. Mark pulled Alira deeper into cover, then rolled out and fired again from a new angle. His movements were fast, unpredictable. The hunters were skilled, but they were trained for open war, not for fighting one man who moved like smoke. Within minutes, the patrol was gone. The sand was scattered with broken armor and weapons. Alira looked at him in awe. Her voice shook. "You fight as if you have lived your whole life in war." Mark reloaded calmly. "I have lived my whole life in survival. There is a difference." Before they could rest, the sound of engines filled the air. Another patrol was coming. This time it was larger, with 10 soldiers and a ship hovering above them. Alira's fear returned. She pressed against the rock. "There are too many. You cannot win again." Mark glanced at her. His face remained calm, his voice steady. "I do not need to win every fight. I only need to keep you alive." He led her through the spires, moving quickly as the hunters closed in. Energy blasts struck the stone behind them, throwing dust into the air. Mark fired back, keeping the soldiers pinned, then pulled Alira into a narrow cave hidden between the rocks. The cave was dark and tight, but it gave them cover. The hunters searched outside, their voices echoing through the desert air. Mark held his rifle ready, listening to every sound. Hours passed before the hunters moved on, fooled into thinking their prey had escaped farther into the desert. Inside the cave, Alira sat in silence. Her doubts were still there, but they were weaker now. She had seen him face numbers again and again, not with strength alone but with cunning, patience, and unshakable will. She whispered, almost to herself, "Perhaps he can protect me. Perhaps this human is different." Mark heard her words but said nothing. He closed his eyes for a moment, resting while keeping his rifle across his lap. Above them, the desert night began to fall. But the hunt was far from over. Stronger enemies were already on their way, and Mark knew the real battle was yet to come. The desert night was cold. Stars stretched across the sky like endless diamonds, and the moonlight painted the sand silver. Mark and Alira walked in silence, their footsteps sinking softly into the ground. Every sound echoed in the emptiness, making Alira feel exposed. But whenever she looked at the human soldier walking beside her, she felt a strange sense of safety. At dawn, Mark spotted ruins on the horizon. They looked different from the broken city behind them. Tall walls, though crumbled, still stood, and the remains of towers rose above the sand. It was an old fortress, perhaps abandoned for centuries. "This will do," Mark said quietly. Alira followed him through the shattered gate. Inside, the fortress was filled with shadows and silence. Birds nested in the cracks, and the wind whistled through broken windows. Yet it was strong enough to keep them hidden from patrols and gave shelter from the desert sun. Mark searched every room carefully, clearing the place with the same focus he had shown in battle. Alira watched him, impressed by how nothing escaped his eyes. He found old storage chambers, collapsed halls, and a courtyard half buried in sand. At last, he declared the fortress safe. Alira sat on a stone bench in the courtyard, her body aching from the long journey. Mark built a small fire using dried wood he had collected earlier. The flames gave light and warmth, chasing away the chill of the night. For the first time since their escape, there was silence without fear. Alira looked at the fire, then at him. "Human," she said softly, "you risk your life for me again and again. Why? I am no one to you. My empire is fallen. My crown is lost. Why do you not leave me and save yourself?" Mark sat across from her, sharpening his knife with calm hands. He answered in a steady voice. "Because you asked for protection. Humans do not abandon those who ask for help." His words were simple, yet they struck deep into her heart. She thought of her guards who had sworn oaths but had failed. She thought of her people, scattered and hiding. Then she looked at this lone soldier, who had no oath, no duty to her, yet stayed by her side without question. "You are strange," Alira whispered. "Your strength is not only in your weapon. It comes from somewhere else. Something I cannot explain." Mark did not reply. He placed his knife aside and checked his rifle, always making sure it was ready. Later, as the fire burned low, Alira asked, "Tell me, human. What is your world like? Do your people fight every day as you do?" Mark looked into the flames. His eyes seemed distant, remembering. "My world is not like this. It has oceans, forests, mountains. Children run free, and families sit together in peace. But we fight when we must, because survival is part of life. War is not what we seek, but it comes, and we stand when it does." Alira listened with wonder. She imagined his world, so different from the ruins around her. She felt warmth in her chest at his words. He was not only a soldier. He carried memories of a home worth protecting. That night, she slept more peacefully than before. Mark stayed awake, watching the entrance of the fortress with his rifle ready. He rested only when the morning sun rose. Days passed in the fortress. They hid from passing patrols and shared food. Mark trained Alira in simple survival skills. He showed her how to move quietly, how to spot tracks, and how to use shadows for cover. She struggled at first, unused to such things, but his patience never broke. One evening, they climbed the tallest tower still standing. From the top, they could see the endless desert stretching in all directions. Alira stood beside him, the wind tugging at her cloak. "When I first met you," she said, "I doubted you. I thought you could never protect me. I thought you would fall like the rest. But now I see something else. You do not fight for glory or for crowns. You fight because it is who you are." Mark glanced at her. His voice was quiet but firm. "I fight because someone must. If I do not, then no one will." Her eyes softened. She felt something she had not felt in a long time, hope. But peace never lasted. One night, as they sat by the fire, a faint humming filled the air. Mark's eyes sharpened. He stood and looked toward the sky. Dark shapes moved against the stars, enemy ships circling above. They had found the fortress. Alira's heart sank. "They are here." Mark grabbed his rifle and checked the charges he had placed at the gates days earlier. His preparation had not been in vain. He turned to her, his face calm but serious. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, do not leave my side." Alira nodded. Fear filled her chest, but so did trust. As the ships descended, the ground shook. Armored hunters poured out, more than before, their weapons glowing red. The fortress walls trembled as they surrounded it. Mark stood tall at the broken gate, rifle ready, his eyes sharp as steel. Alira stood behind him, her silver eyes wide but steady. She remembered her own words to him the day they met, "Can you protect me, human?" Now she knew the answer was not only yes, but far more than she had ever imagined. The bond between them was no longer of doubt. It was of trust, forged in fire and survival. And that bond would be tested in the greatest battle yet. The sun rose over the desert, painting the fortress in gold and shadows. Inside, Mark moved quickly, checking traps and ensuring every corner was ready for the incoming assault. Princess Alira stood beside him, her cloak wrapped tightly, her eyes filled with determination. She no longer doubted him, but she feared what was to come. Above, enemy ships circled. The soldiers on the ground were vast in number, armored and disciplined. At their head was the warlord, a giant of a soldier with black and silver armor, carrying a massive weapon charged with energy. His reputation was known across the wastelands. Few had ever survived a battle against him. Mark observed silently. He knew brute force alone could not win. He studied the fortress layout, the broken walls, the tunnels, and the open courtyards. He calculated each step of the battle in his mind, timing and patience his greatest weapons. Alira approached him. "Human, they are too many. How can we possibly survive?" Mark looked at her, his voice calm but firm. "We survive because we have to. I will not let them take you. Trust me, as you always have." Alira nodded, her heart pounding. She had seen him fight countless times, and each time he had prevailed against odds that seemed impossible. She trusted him completely. The first wave of soldiers approached. They moved with precision, weapons ready. Mark fired at weak points, using the walls and rubble for cover. Explosions rocked the fortress as traps ignited, sending several soldiers flying. His movements were quick, deliberate, and deadly. Alira watched from behind a pillar. She saw him duck, roll, and fire, his attacks precise. He did not waste energy, each shot counted. The soldiers were skilled, but they were unprepared for a human who fought not only with strength but with cunning and strategy. The warlord appeared next, striding toward the fortress with a force that shook the ground. His massive weapon glowed, ready to destroy everything in its path. Alira felt a chill run through her body. She had never seen such a warrior, and even now, she wondered how Mark could face him. Mark did not hesitate. He led Alira through hidden tunnels to flank the warlord. From a high position, he took aim at weak points in the enemy's armor, firing with perfect timing. Sparks flew from the warlord's armor, but he continued forward, undeterred. The warlord swung his weapon, breaking walls and sending debris flying. Mark ducked, rolled, and fired again, hitting another weak point. He used every trap he had set, every shadow and narrow passage, turning the fortress into a maze of danger for the enemy. Alira could not believe what she was seeing. One human, small in size compared to the towering warlord, moved with speed and intelligence that seemed impossible. He dodged attacks, set traps, and struck with precision, weakening the enemy slowly but surely. The warlord roared in frustration. He was used to crushing armies with ease, but one human had slowed his advance. Mark used the opening, moving quickly to plant charges at critical points of the fortress. Explosions tore through walls, creating barriers and confusion among the soldiers. Alira realized the fortress itself was now a weapon in Mark's hands. Every stone, every broken pillar, every hidden tunnel was part of his strategy. She felt awe and relief. This human was more than a soldier, he was a master of survival and battle. The enemy soldiers tried to regroup, but Mark was relentless. He moved between the shadows, striking where they least expected, using traps and precise shots to eliminate their numbers. Slowly, the overwhelming force began to falter. Finally, only the warlord remained. His weapon glowed brighter, and he charged directly at Mark. The ground shook with each step. Alira held her breath, fearing the end. Mark stood his ground. He watched the warlord approach, waiting for the perfect moment. When the warlord swung his massive weapon, Mark dodged to the side, luring him into a narrow corridor. The warlord's size was a disadvantage there, his weapon struck the walls, slowing him down. Mark took his chance. He fired at the exposed gaps in the warlord's armor, each shot hitting precisely. Sparks and energy flares erupted, blinding the enemy. The warlord stumbled, trying to swing his weapon, but Mark was too fast. With a final charge from a trap, Mark sent the warlord crashing to the ground. The fortress shook from the impact, dust and debris filling the air. Alira ran to Mark, her eyes wide with disbelief and admiration. The warlord, the greatest threat they had faced, lay defeated. The remaining soldiers, seeing their leader fall, fled into the desert, never to return. Mark lowered his rifle and checked on Alira. "Are you hurt?" he asked. Alira shook her head, tears in her eyes. "No. You saved me again. You saved us all." Mark nodded, calm as always. "The battle is won, but we must stay alert. Others may come. For now, we rest." The princess looked around at the fortress, the broken walls, and the quiet desert. She felt a deep respect for the human who had protected her with every ounce of his strength and skill. "Human," she said softly, "I asked you once if you could protect me. Now I know. You are stronger than anyone I have ever known, not just in body, but in spirit." Mark looked at her, his face serious but gentle. "Strength is nothing without purpose. My purpose is to keep you alive. That is all I need to know." Alira nodded, understanding fully for the first time. His strength was not only in his weapons or his tactics, but in his courage, his patience, and his unbreakable spirit. As the sun set over the desert, casting long shadows across the fortress, Alira felt hope rise within her. She knew that as long as this human soldier was by her side, they could face anything. Together, they had turned the tide against overwhelming odds, and the story of one human standing against an empire would be remembered for generations. The fortress was quiet now, the battle over. But Alira and Mark both knew that their journey was not finished. There were still dangers ahead, still enemies to face, and still a universe to protect. For now, however, they had survived. And in that survival, a bond had been forged, one of trust, respect, and unshakable courage. The desert stretched endlessly under the rising sun, golden and silent. The fortress still stood, scarred from the battles fought within its walls. Dust floated in the warm morning air, and the wind carried the faint scent of smoke and metal. Mark walked through the courtyard, checking the remaining traps and clearing debris. Every corner was secure, yet his attention never wavered. Princess Alira followed him, moving with more confidence than before. She had faced impossible odds alongside this human, and each time he had protected her. She remembered the first day she had asked him, "Can you protect me, human?" At that moment, she had doubted him. Now, after countless battles, she knew that his answer had been more than truthful. They had rested only briefly after the battle with the warlord. Patrols could still appear at any time, and Mark remained vigilant. Alira watched him as he worked, observing the calm precision in every movement. His strength was not only physical, it was in his mind, his spirit, and his courage. She approached him carefully. "Mark," she said, her voice soft. "I have seen everything. You have fought enemies larger, faster, and stronger than you, and yet you survived. You protected me when no one else could. How can one human be so strong?" Mark looked at her with steady eyes. "Strength is not only in the body, Alira. It is in courage, in will, and in the choice to act when it matters most. I protect you because I must, because I choose to. That is all strength is." Alira listened, absorbing his words. Her silver eyes shone with understanding. In her world, strength had always been measured by armies, weapons, and status. But Mark had shown her a new kind of strength, one that came from the heart and mind, combined with determination. She thought of every moment they had shared, the ruined city where he had first saved her from machines, the marketplace where he had faced raiders alone, the desert chase, and the final battle at the fortress. Each time, he had faced impossible odds, yet he had prevailed. Not because he was invincible, but because he was relentless and focused. Alira's heart swelled with respect and gratitude. She stepped closer to him. "You are more than I ever imagined. You are not just strong, you are my shield, my guide, and my courage. I will never forget what you have done." Mark gave her a small nod. "It was never about glory. It was about survival, and keeping you alive. That is enough for me." For the first time, Alira felt completely safe. She realized that no army, no empire, and no weapon could compare to the determination of one human who refused to yield. She understood now that strength was not about size or firepower, it was about heart. They spent the rest of the morning repairing what they could of the fortress. Alira helped Mark gather water and organize supplies. For the first time, she felt capable, no longer only a princess in need of protection. Mark watched her with quiet approval, silently teaching her that survival required skill, patience, and courage, not just status or command. As the sun climbed higher, Alira looked out over the desert. She could see the distant horizon, the open sands that stretched beyond sight. She thought of her people, scattered across the world, and of the battles that still lay ahead. But she no longer felt fear. With Mark by her side, she knew they could face anything. Mark approached her, holding a small map he had drawn in the sand. He traced the routes of patrols and enemy movements with a finger. "We must keep moving," he said calmly. "There are still enemies. There are still dangers. But we have time now to plan." Alira nodded. "Then we will move together. Whatever comes, I will follow you." The bond between them was no longer just survival. It was trust, respect, and mutual understanding. They had faced death together, and each had seen the strength of the other. For Alira, Mark was no longer just a protector, he was a symbol of hope, courage, and the unbreakable spirit of humanity. Hours passed, and the desert winds grew hotter. They climbed to the highest tower of the fortress to scout the land. From there, Alira could see the tracks of distant enemies and the paths they would need to take to avoid them. She marveled at how Mark read the land, predicting movements and planning strategies. His mind was as sharp as his aim, and she realized that his strength was not only physical, it was intelligence, patience, and careful observation. She turned to him, a smile forming on her lips. "I understand now. You are strong not because you fight well, but because you think, you plan, and you never give up. That is a power no army can defeat." Mark nodded. "You understand. That is enough. Now we move forward together." The day faded into evening, and the sky turned deep purple. Stars appeared, and the fortress walls were bathed in silver light. Alira looked at Mark, standing tall and alert, his eyes scanning the horizon. She felt a deep respect and admiration for him, and for the first time, she realized the full truth: this human had not only protected her body but also given her courage, hope, and faith in the impossible. "I once doubted you," she said softly, "but now I know. You are stronger than anyone I have ever known, human. Not because of what you carry, but because of who you are." Mark looked at her, his expression calm but kind. "Strength is not about being the strongest. It is about never giving up when it matters. And I will never give up on you." Alira felt a warmth in her heart. She knew the journey was far from over. There would be more dangers, more enemies, and more battles ahead. But she also knew that with Mark, they could face anything together. As night settled over the fortress, they stood side by side, looking out at the endless desert. The stars shone brightly, a reminder that the universe was vast, full of unknowns, but also full of hope. The alien princess, once afraid and doubting, now stood with confidence. She had seen the true strength of a human, not in weapons or armor, but in spirit, courage, and determination. And she knew that as long as Mark was by her side, no force in the universe could take her down. The journey that had begun with a simple question, "Can you protect me, human?" had led to a revelation. One human, guided by heart and will, could change the course of battles, protect lives, and inspire hope. Alira turned to Mark, her silver eyes glowing with trust and admiration. "Thank you," she said. "For everything." Mark simply nodded, looking out over the desert. His duty was clear, his purpose unshaken. Together, they would continue their journey, facing the universe as a team. And the story of the human who protected an alien princess would be remembered across worlds as a legend of courage, strength, and hope. The night was calm, but the stars above reminded them that adventure awaited. Together, human and princess, they were ready for whatever the universe could throw at them.